As a follow-up to my How Do Thieves Work in OSR video, I wanted to make a similar short video about clerics. Now the term OSR is quite broad and encompasses various games from 1974's OD&D, Basic, Expert, Advanced D&D, various retro clones and many others. Here I'll be focusing on BX D&D and its retro clone Old School Essentials. In most editions, clerics have the ability to cast spells and turn undead, which means to repel undead using a holy symbol. They can also hold their own in combat, as they can wear heavy armour and bear a shield. They are restricted to blunt weapons, as they cannot draw blood in combat, a restriction based on historical priestly law. Turning undead is the ability to repulse undead using holy force. Imagine Van Helsing using a cross to repel Dracula. This is the inspiration behind the Turn Undead ability. And here's how Turn Undead works in BX and OSE. A cleric turns undead instead of making a melee attack. Though not specified in the text, it is presumed that the cleric must present their holy symbol when turning undead, probably requiring a free hand to do so. A cleric must always carry a holy symbol. Roll 2d6 to determine the highest hit dice of undead that can be affected, as seen in this table. A third level cleric, for example, that rolls a 7 can affect ghouls, zombies and skeletons. A 5th level cleric that rolls a 9 will affect mummies, wraiths, wights and ghouls, and will be able to automatically destroy zombies and skeletons. The names of the monsters are listed rather than monster hit dice. Any monster not listed in the table will normally have details in their bestiary description, such as turns as a wight, or some such. If the cleric rolls enough to affect the present undead, then roll another 2d6 to determine how many hit dice of creatures are affected. At least one creature will always be affected. The weakest creatures will be affected first. An entry of a T on the table means that the undead type is automatically turned, but 2d6 must still be rolled to determine how many are turned. Turned undead retreat from the cleric. For how long the undead remain away is not clarified in the rules. Each DM will determine how long the undead will flee for, and in many cases these undead will simply not be seen again. If the table entry shows a D, the affected undead are destroyed instead of being turned. Clerics may only attempt to turn undead once per encounter, though the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide suggests that multiple attempts can be made to repel where multiple forms of creatures subject to turning are involved. In such cases, a new attempt may be made only after a successful attempt has repelled some of the enemies already. Old School Essentials Advanced Genre Rules provides optional rules that state only one turn attempt may be made per encounter. The duration of the turn effect is 1 turn. However, in basic fantasy RPG, a cleric may attempt another turn undead if they were previously successful, though this rule specifically concerns mixed groups of undead and is very similar to the AD&D rule. If a cleric fails a turn undead attempt, they may not try again for 1 turn. Here, turned undead flee for 2d4 turns, but if pursued and cornered, may resume attacking the party. The rules for reattempts and turn duration vary by system, and are ultimately up to the DM, but the consensus seems to be that a reattempt cannot be made directly after a failed attempt. There is also no details of the range of the ability. Presume that the cleric and his holy symbol must be within line of sight to the undead, as well as being audible. Spellcasting. The most notable thing about cleric spellcasting in BX and OSE is that clerics do not get the ability to cast spells until 2nd level. Some OSR systems amend this to allow for a single spell at 1st level. Thematically, this can represent that the cleric must prove themselves before their deity decides to grant them magical abilities. Clerics pray for their spells each day, and once chosen the spells cannot be changed until the next time the cleric rests. A cleric can prepare multiple versions of the same spell. Clerics can cast spells whilst wearing armour. Casting a spell requires the cleric to stand still, speak and gesture, meaning their voice and hands must be unimpeded, and if the cleric is disturbed whilst casting the spell, it is ruined and lost. Many players will choose the Cure Light Wounds spell, which cures 1d6 plus 1 hit points to a single target touched. However, it is often worth trying something different, but at first level most of the spells are not particularly powerful. The cleric has some reversible spells. These are spells which have the opposite effect, such as the light spell, which instead creates a radius of darkness. In the Mensa versions of D&D Basic, it states that clerics cannot learn the reverse of the spells until reaching level 4, and in some OSR versions, only chaotic clerics can cast the reverse of spells, whilst being unable to cast the standard versions. In fact, the Moldvay expert set states, "Using reversed spells is looked upon with disfavour by the powers the cleric serves, and may result in penalties, or even an alignment change if overused. The DM should choose how best to handle reverse spells in their game." Speaking of alignment, it's very important to the cleric and they must adhere to the principles of their deity. A player character cleric is normally lawful alignment. As stated in the D&D Expert Moldvay set, should a cleric behave in a manner that is not pleasing to his or her deity, the deity may become angered and punish the offender. This punishment could take many forms. Some examples are a -1 penalty on to hit rolls, sending the cleric on a dangerous quest, or refusing to give the cleric any spells at all. The DM may decide what the punishment might be in such a case. To regain the favour of the deity, a cleric might find it wise to donate money and magic items to the religion, build a church or temple, gain large numbers of converts, or defeat some great foe of the religion. Again, the exact details are left to the DM. I have briefly discussed the difficulty of maintaining this rule in my contentious anti-cleric video. To briefly summarise, the cleric player should follow the dictates of their usually lawful god, but should also ensure that fellow party members do not act in a fashion that breaks the laws of the cleric's god. Being associated with the criminals and chaotic sorts and turning a blind eye to their actions is not acceptable. This will inevitably lead to conflict between the cleric and thief, unless the thief's activity is completely unknown to the cleric. This rule is a little difficult to manage and relies on cooperation between the DM and player. The DM should explain the types of actions which are prohibited to the cleric, and the player in turn should attempt to follow these guidelines and not attempt to get around them for his own benefit. Having clerics follow a lawful code of ethics makes sense, but I find that dogmatic adherence to lawful behaviour begins to dominate party actions. Decisions tend to be made to suit the morality of the cleric, as, after all, the cleric is the only basic class which will be mechanically punished for making a wrong decision or acting in an unscrupulous manner. This can be fine for some campaigns, and less interesting in others. After all, a lot of interest can be found in the morally grey actions of an otherwise good party, so bear in mind this additional restriction and how it will affect the actions of the party. To summarise the cleric in BXD&D, at early levels the cleric is as competent in combat as a fighter, only with a restriction to the weapons that they can use. Clerics may wear any armour and bear a shield, so they can join the fighters in the front line. It is only from level 4 that fighters begin to excel. The cleric can act as party healer, bulwark against undead, and will eventually have very powerful restorative spells and utility spells at his disposal. However, the cleric is bound to follow the teachings of his deity, and deviation can be severely punished. This can lead to interesting gameplay, but can become predictable and limit player actions. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or comment, and as always, thanks for watching.